What is up, Team Awesemo? PeteyMac, Greg Ehrenberg. We've got Tyler producing today. Big time Tuesday, 15 games on the slate. I got little Joe to get going a little bit. Sluggish this morning, so we got fired up here, Greg.
Hey, 15 games, and I mean, I was joking about this before, and I don't want to rehash all the stuff we talked about before we start with Tuesday. That means it's Andrew Heaney Day. This is, I think, the 6th consecutive Tuesday he started on.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with him at this point. Every time we do a show, we're locking in on Andrew Heaney, and he's been a factor of a pitcher. He's not just, like a crap pitcher that doesn't matter. He matters in all these slates, as it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of is a crap pitcher. He's just one that, I mean, he's not actually crap. He's
occasionally crap.
He's a middle of the rotation pitcher who happens to strike out a lot of guys. So, when he doesn't allow runs, he ends up with big fantasy games. He scored, I think it was 26 fantasy points his last couple outings. And the pitching options today are really rough. It is hard to find pitching to like. So Andrew Heaney, the field is gravitating towards him at a pretty high rate.
I threw up in my mouth when I looked at the top pitchers today. One of those tools at Awesemo.com. I mean, you have Yu Darvish. He's probably the biggest name, but he's pitching at Coors Field. And then we'll get into Trevor Rogers maybe leading this slate as it all turns out, but we'll get into it as we go along here. 15 games. You do have Coors Field in play with the Padres there, though no runs last night, as many of you are surely well aware of. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of weather to worry about tonight. A couple of games you want to keep an eye on as the day goes on, but nothing that's really going to factor into our analysis here. Remember, of course, if you're not able to watch your favorite Awesemo shows on YouTube, almost all of our YouTube shows are available on the Awesemo Podcast Network. And even better, when you watch and then submit a 5-star review with your Twitter handle or Awesemo username included, you'll be entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. A month, not a week. We award one lucky winner every Friday. Your reviews will be eligible to win for up to 1 year. So you got chance after chance after chance. And this is the best way out there to win a free month of Awesemo Plus. You're competing against less people than in any other giveaway that we run. So make your 5-star review count. We've got a podcast for every sport available on every major platform. Head on over to awesemo.com/podcast to check out the latest there. If you are watching on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, keep up with all our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much, much more. And once you subscribe, hit that notification button as well so you get the alerts when our shows do go live. Be sure to also check out the promo code for new Awesemo Plus members that we have for this show. Use promo code MLB Strategy Show at checkout to get 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That's MLB Strategy Show, all caps, one word, for 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus if you are a new member. And get involved in the chat as well. We'll be keeping an eye on that, and we can mix it into the show if you have any questions, things along those lines. But otherwise, let's fire it up. Pirates Nationals. Patrick Corbin still stinks against the bad Pirates offense here.
Yeah, so, I mean, Patrick Corbin so far this year, not been great. 6.21 ERA, 6.54 expected ERA. And it's been a steady decline for him over the last couple of years. He signed that really big deal with the Washington Nationals, was okay in his first season with them, underperformed a little bit relative to expectations, but was still a quality pitcher. And now he just looks like a replacement level guy. 4.66 ERA last year, 5.17 expected ERA. Talked about his numbers just a second ago from this year, and it's just been bad. And it's hard to really see anything in the underlying stats that would suggest a turnaround. His walk rate, career high 9.5%. So he's not generating. He's not keeping the ball in the strike zone. Then he's not generating strikeouts either. 17.6% K rate. So these are really alarming trends when you have an older pitcher whose velocity is down versus career average, strikeout rate is down, walk rate is way up. And, I think it's because when he actually puts the ball in the strike zone, given his diminished stuff at this point in his career, he gets hit really hard. So I think a lot of people might look at the name value on Patrick Corbin and are going to want to roster him considering how weak the pitching options are today. He's only 7,000 on DraftKings, but he's picking up nearly 20% ownership. And that just goes to show how bad the pitching options are today. So with that in mind, the Pittsburgh Pirates, I don't think are a bad contrarian stack. They have a 10.9% chance to be the top value stock on the slate. That is the second best odds of any team. And I think they offer some good leverage off of Patrick Corbin, who as of now looks like he's going to be pretty popular.
And as Eric mentions in the chat, look, if Corbin is popular, that means that people aren't necessarily jumping on the Pirates stack. So you might be able to find some leverage as far as that goes. Other end of this game, Tyler Anderson going for Pittsburgh. How do you like Washington's offense to potentially blow up on what should be, I'm sure, a hot night in DC?
Yeah, so on the Washington side of the game, a lot of their offense is really concentrated. We know that Trey Turner, Juan Soto, a lot of the production comes from the top of the order. This looks just like a pretty neutral team to target today. They are a little expensive, although the pitching options are so poor that I don't know that really matters all that much. I'm going to be focusing much more on the top overall odds of a team being a top score than necessarily the top value, unless there's some super outlier, where it's like the Pirates, where we have them with an 11% chance to be a top value stack. But, Washington Nationals, they just look like about a neutral play to me, 3.5% chance to be a top stack, 3% ownership share. So to me, it's worth having them in the player pool, but I'm not going to be that much different than the field on the Nationals. And then even so, most of the ownership I do have to Washington, it's going to be Trey Turner and Juan Soto.
Kyle Schwarber getting the mix for you, and that's your dart where you hope he has that multi-homer game like he did this weekend.
Yeah, he homered last night also. So Kyle Schwarber has been hitting well as of late. He got off to a really weak start in his career with the Nationals, but he has turned it around a little bit as of late, although the build I made this morning, I was not really getting to him at a clip that matters at all. So there's definitely better teams I'm going to be targeting.
Yankees Blue Jays playing in Buffalo. It's not Dunedin, but it is offensive friendly. I don't know if it'll be as friendly as Fenway Park was to Toronto on Sunday when they hit 8 home runs. But Hyunjin Ryu will have the start against a Yankees offense still trying to find its way after being shut out on Sunday by the Philadelphia Phillies. And then Jordan Montgomery. Let's start with the Blue Jays offense point of view against Montgomery. Is this an opportunity to jump on the Blue Jays, or is Montgomery someone that you think limits the upward ability, the ceiling for this Toronto offense?
I don't think it really limits the ceiling too much. It's just this team's appropriately owned right now. There's so many teams on these 15 game slates where it ends up they're like 75% of the teams, it's like they're 3% on with a 3% chance of being a top stack. And I think all of that is about appropriate. The teams that are really important to talk about for the most part, it's going to be San Diego, who gets to later. That's going to be an outlier. I do view this situation as a little bit different from yesterday's situation, just because yesterday, even though we had them as the team with the best odds of being a top stack, they were also going wildly overowned in our final ownership percentages. Whereas today, we have them as about appropriately owned. But for this slate, there's so many teams, Toronto being one of them, 3% chance to be a top stack, 3% ownership share. And, I think that's kind of what makes sense. And I already see people, in the YouTube chat saying, hey, just play 150 lineups and stack everybody. And not necessarily that that's exactly what I do, except there's a lot of teams on this slate that I'm going to have like 3% ownership to. And the Blue Jays are going to be one of them.
Yeah, and Toronto's always capable of busting out, having that big day where they're hitting lots of home runs, scoring lots of points for you. So that's part of it. But yeah, it's really the Padres and everybody else. Everybody else seems to be in the same boat. All other 29 teams, nobody's popping there. Even the Rockies being at Coors Field, being that they are facing Yu Darvish, they're not one of the top stacks on this day. So we'll be spending plenty of time on the Padres and some ways to differentiate if you want to jump on that game in a big way, even after the big 0 last night. How about Hyunjin Ryu for Toronto? He's always someone that pops up for me. He has some strikeout ability. Look, I don't know what to make of the Yankees right now. The offense is broken. I know that much, but they're not necessarily the team I want to run out and target yet. Where are you on that?
Yeah, I just wish Ryu had more strikeout upside. And the Yankees also have hit the ball better over the last couple of weeks. Also, the offense getting a little bit healthier. But the real issue here with Ryu is that he only has a 22% strikeout rate. And the matchup, at best, we have to consider it neutral, right? And I still think it tends more to be more on the difficult side than easy, even if the Yankees offense has underperformed this year. So just the lack of strikeouts from Ryu this year, that's really capped his upside. He's also somebody who hasn't worked super deep into a lot of games this year. So bringing that up really quick, but it's just, the numbers fine at run prevention, 3.34 ERA, 3.59 expected ERA. So I don't want to be stacking the Yankees against him. But at the same time too, Ryu, even with the lack of good pitching options on the slate, he's averaging 16.9 DraftKings points for the season. The last time he scored over 20 fantasy points was May 18th. And he's only scored over 20 fantasy points 4 times the entire season. There's a whole lot of games where Ryu scores 15 to 18 DraftKings points. So there's been a little bit of a floor there, except for a 15-game slate, even though the pitching options aren't good, it's hard for me to believe that 15, 16, 17 fantasy points would land him in an optimal lineup.
Well, one thing to watch is if Aaron Judge is in the starting lineup, did not play on Sunday because of back spasms. And obviously he's been the guy for the Yankees really over the course of this season. They can't bear to be without him for any period of time there. The Mets get the Cubs at Citi Field. Taijuan Walker has been just terrific over the course of this season. Goes up against Alec Mills and his 6+ ERA. How do you like Taijuan Walker against the Cubs offense that I don't think anybody was big on coming into this season, but they've found a way to win games?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that the Cubs are getting is that Chris Bryant's playing at an MVP level again. And even though he's not that old, I thought Chris Bryant's best years were behind him, and he did win an MVP a few years ago. So not that we thought that he would be able to replicate that, but I mean, I didn't even think he was going to be a top of the lineup type hit, like top hitter in baseball type of guy anymore. And apparently he's recaptured that form. But the key here is going to be Taijuan Walker, who, 2.07 ERA, 3.39 expected ERA, not been a super high strikeout guy this year, but still 24.9%. And it's been overall, to me, the best year from Taijuan Walker's career, and really something that we expected when he first came up as a prospect through the Seattle organization. He was one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. Had some shoulder issues, never really panned out. And now his velocity is way up, and it looks like he's becoming that guy with the Mets. So now Taijuan Walker, 94.5 mile per hour average fastball velocity. That is his highest mark in 5 years. So that's been big in terms of getting him back on track. And, the strikeouts, like I said, they haven't been massive for him, except he's been so effective that he's pitching, fairly deep into a lot of games this year, and, 7 innings in his last start. And I think that's making him somebody who at least is worth considering on a slate where the pitching options are so weak.
We kind of touched on, the slates. It's a lot of the same stories. Any exception for the Mets going up here against Alec Mills? You do have a high over under 8.5 at Citi Field with Taijuan Walker pitching one half of this game.
Yeah, I mean, once again, the Mets just kind of look like a neutral play for me. It's another team, one of many, with a 3% projected chance of being a top stack, 3% ownership share. Some individual players on the Mets that I do want to get, or at least one at least. I'm going to keep chasing Francisco Lindor. I know he's been absolutely miserable this year. And Pete, I know you're
better of late.
Yeah, a little bit, but still massively disappointing for the season. And, I still think there's enough. I said this exact same thing about him yesterday, but there's enough of a track record there. And he's been a high-end all-star to even MVP candidate for most of the last 5 years at this point, that I have to think Lindor is going to get back on track eventually. I can't really point to what it is that's causing the struggles, but I think he's going to figure it out sooner rather than later. And as long as his price remains cheap on Fanduel and Draftkings, he's somebody I'm going to be putting in my lineups, as long also as the field isn't there. Because right now he's been terrible enough. The field isn't rostering him and the price is cheap. So if the price goes up or the field starts catching on to him, then it'll be somebody that I won't consider as much. But for now, I'm gonna be chasing him at the bottom.
I think that's a good chase, and just eyeballing him and the Mets are a team I watch a lot the last couple of weeks. You see more line drives, hitting the ball harder. So I don't have the data behind that, but I think if you looked it up, you'd see it. So it's getting there for Francisco Lindor. What do you think? Mets, Islanders, Nets parlay tonight.
I am on the Bucks for this series, which I think was a bad bet, but now looks good because of injuries. So yeah. I prefer the Bucks for tonight. I would like them to win. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I got lucky with that bet, but the Bucks could still end up blowing the series because they've looked not so great in the playoffs themselves, at least not in this series.
They've done that before, and we'll see if James Harden's music plays tonight, I suppose. But let's run back to the baseball here. Matt Harvey, easy guy to target. I can't believe he's still getting major league starts. A 7.41 ERA, pitching at Cleveland. I don't understand how he keeps getting run out there other than, man, the Orioles just have nobody to go to.
Yeah. So, I mean, I usually rely fairly heavily on our top stacks when I'm building stacks. I am not going to for this particular spot. We have the Indians going really overowned. I don't care. I'm still going to be rostering Cleveland because Matt Harvey, I mean, he's so we always talk about, high-end pitchers generally tend to be safe unless it's, Tyler Glasnow, although he still ended up being an optimal lineup last night. But, unless one of those guys gets hurt, Tyler Glasnow pitches 4 innings last night, still ends up scoring 15 DraftKings points. But generally the high-end pitchers way safer than the high-end offenses. And the Indians aren't even a high-end offense. But going up against Matt Harvey, that is as safe as it gets because he cannot get anybody out. His ERA this year, 7.41. His ERA last year, 11.57. His ERA before, 7.09. 2018, the best year he's had in a while, 4.94 ERA. But in 2017, his final full season with the Mets, 6.7 ERA. No clue, like you said, why this guy is still getting run in the MLB level. It makes no sense to me. Like, I get it. He was great 8 years ago now. That's how long it's been since Matt Harvey was really good. It's been forever ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So 6 years ago, it's been a long time. And, teams are still running him out there, but he's just not been the same guy since the thoracic outlet surgery. Average fastball velocity, 93.7 miles per hour this year. When he was at his peak, he was a guy who was throwing 97 miles per hour, got it up to 100 on occasion. He's not that guy anymore. And for whatever reason, teams continue to jump. I don't even think he would find success in the KBO at this point. But as long as he's pitching at the major league level, I have to stack against him because he is just incapable of getting major league hitters out.
It's sad to watch. And yeah, you're getting into that Orioles bullpen too early in the game. So it's just opportunity after opportunity there for Cleveland to have a big night. Cal Quantrill on the other end, anything notable with him going up against an Orioles offense that tends to be sneaky, capable?
Yeah, there's definitely been some nights where Baltimore has ended up looking pretty good at the end of the day and in the top stack stool. And once again, I think if you do want to pay up for, Trevor Rogers, Yu Darvish at pitcher as a secondary stack, I think the Baltimore Orioles would fit with the Padres if you want to go heavy on San Diego. So Baltimore today, we only have with a 2.2% chance of being a top stack, but a 13.6% chance of being the top value. So the two cheap offenses to target right now look like the Baltimore Orioles and the Pittsburgh Pirates. They have the two best odds of being the top value stack by far. So if you're looking for a secondary stack to make with the San Diego Padres on either Fanduel or DraftKings, Baltimore and Pittsburgh look like the best options.
And all this info that Greg is coming with for you, it's not just popping out of his head. It's not the Robo Greg making it happen. This is because of the terrific Awesemo Plus tools that he has access to, and you can have access to as well. And it's not just baseball. You can use it for every sport, play basketball, hockey, whatever you want, football when we get there. And Awesemo Plus weekly pass goes for $29.95. And this gives you full access to all the premium content and tools at Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, which we're talking about time and time again, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much, much more. And if you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, then you can take advantage of the promo code we have for this show, which is MLB Strategy Show. Don't give it to us live before lock, guys. Hook us up a little bit. MLB Strategy Show promo code. We'll hook you up right back. 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're just looking to play MLB DFS, you could care less about the other sports. You can sign up now for our Awesemo Plus MLB weekly package for only $15.95, about half the price. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. And if you want to sample what we have, free today at Awesemo.com, MLB player rankings as well as NBA player rankings. Red Sox, Braves, next game on the list here. Eduardo Rodriguez, a 6+ ERA. And this is the guy who's supposed to be the Red Sox ace. And then Tucker Davidson going the other way. It's been kind of a good value pick over the course of the last few weeks. Over under is high in Atlanta, 9.5. Let's start with Erod against this Braves offense, Greg.
And then one more thing I also want to put up because we did get a super chat here from our guy Soldope1234, usually asking us NBA questions, but he does have a baseball question today. Thanks for the super chat. But doing a little bit of producing for us here because he's asking who our favorite PrizePicks picks are. That's good. That's going to fit into what we want to talk about today. So we could do that now. And then also thoughts on Sammy Long. So Sammy Long, somebody else who I was going to talk about later, but I could touch on him now. I don't like him as a fantasy option. He's likely going to be pitching out of the bullpen as a long reliever. He did really well from a fantasy standpoint last time out, but he only pitched 4 innings and he threw 69 pitches, 4 innings. If he gets 4 innings again and he pitches perfectly, he could have an okay fantasy game like he did last time out, but it's hard for me to really want to roster somebody who I don't think is going to pitch more than 4 innings out of the bullpen. So that is not somebody that I'm looking to make a play on a 15 game slate, even if the other pitching options aren't great. And also he might not even go 4 innings this time. It might only be 3 innings or something like that. So nothing for me. But Pete, what do we have for PrizePicks today?
Oh, prize picks. How about Eduardo Rodriguez? I mean, it's not a great spot for him against the Braves, but you do have some strikeouts here, and prize picks looking at an over-under of 5.5 strikeouts. And I think the question is, does Eduardo Rodriguez last in this game long enough to get to that sixth strikeout?
I think he does. And even though he has a 6.03 ERA this year, he's gotten very unlucky. He has a 3.59 expected ERA, 3.85 FIP. So all the underlying numbers look good for him. 370 BABIP, that's really unlucky. A 64% strand rate, that's really unlucky. So he's had a lot of bad variance in his way. And then, I mean, you look at the strikeout rate, still 25.8%. That's actually above his career average. So I think that number on Eduardo Rodriguez is too low just based on his ERA this year. But if you look at his underlying numbers, it is right in line with everything else he's ever done in his career. So he has, like I said, it's the really high ERA, but a 3.85 FIP this year. For his career, he's a 3.93 FIP. So right in line with all of his career numbers, just really getting done in by bad sequencing, bad luck, definitely bad luck on batting average on balls in play. So I like Eduardo Rodriguez to turn it around. It's still a tough matchup, so not somebody I'm dying to roster, on Fanduel or Draftkings.
Sure.
But for prize picks, I think that number's too low.
All right, so 5.5 is one we can look at there. We'll have another prize picks for you coming up. Tucker Davidson typically has been a pretty good value guy, someone you could look at kind of the bottom of the chart and try to find a little bit. And now he's up to 7,400 on DraftKings. So suddenly he's not that punt pitcher that you could throw out there to get to all the Padres bats you want to get to.
Yeah, and there was a time where it made sense to roster Tucker Davidson because remember when he first made his big league debut, he was priced at 4,900 on DraftKings. And there's a big difference between a starting pitcher, even at 4,900 versus somewhere in the 7K range. And his numbers this year, he's a 1.53 ERA, but he's been lucky to have that number because he's a 188 BABIP. So his underlying numbers, he's a 4.22 expected ERA. It looks like he's going to be more of a middle of the rotation pitcher. His minor league numbers, hard to really know what to make of them just because we talked about this before. There were no minor league numbers from last year, but he's considered a non-prospect in the Braves organization, not ranked by Fangraphs. So to me, I don't think he's anything other than kind of a back-end rotation guy or long reliever, maybe spot starter going forward. If you look at his ZiPS projections for the rest of the season, which is something that I like to rely on when we have pitchers with very little data at the big league level, then projected for a 4.82 ERA the rest of the season. So Tucker Davidson, to me, not somebody I want to get to. As for Boston stacks on the other side, we do have the Red Sox with the second best chance to be the top stack of the day behind the San Diego Padres. So the Red Sox, I think that is a sensible stack.
All right. So taking a look at the Red Sox and Atlanta, I mean, always a ballpark where it starts jumping out of there once you get to June, especially. If you're wondering about prize picks, look, they sponsor our show and they offer the simplest fantasy game on the market. As you just heard, it's over-unders. You don't have to worry about sharks, lineup optimizers, mass multi-entry. You simply pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board to go over or under their projected score. And correctly selecting a 5-player lineup can net you up to 10 times your entry fee. You can do NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, esports. You can mix it all together. PrizePicks has it all, and you can combine your picks, as I mentioned. So download the mobile app in the App Store or on Google Play today and make your first deposit to receive an instant deposit match of up to $100 when you use promo code Awesemo. Simplify daily fantasy with PrizePicks today. And we'll throw one more on PrizePicks at you. Same line, Taijuan Walker, 5.5 strikeouts against the Cubs. I think that's one you got to jump on.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Walker before, and he's having a really good season. The velocity is up to really his highest rate since early in his career before he got hurt and really before he lost some of his luster as a top prospect. And it took a while for him to break out. He's 28 years old now, but he's having the best year of his career, and it looks legitimate. 2.07 ERA, 3.39 expected ERA, 2.84 FIP. So, it's not like he's going to have a 2.07 ERA for the rest of the season. But with that in mind, the strikeout, 24.9%, that is the well above his career average rates. It's actually the highest he's ever had over a full season. So give me the over on Taijuan Walker, the under on Eduardo Rodriguez.
Okay, so there you go. Check out PrizePicks for more over-unders and lines you could play there. You can bet pick the fantasy number as well and go over under the projection they have there. Luis Castillo is kind of a high projection if you check out PrizePicks, even though he's a guy with a 6.5 ERA taking on an improved Milwaukee Brewers offense. You mentioned Eduardo Rodriguez, that the underlying numbers are in his favor. So he's a guy that you don't have to be scared off by that ERA. What about Luis Castillo, another guy supposed to be one of, if not the best pitcher in Cincinnati? Hasn't been at all.
No, he might. I mean, I don't know what the issue is, but I mean, the velocity is, it's still high relative to other pitchers, 96.9 average fastball velocity, but he was at 97.6 last year when he first got called up. It was 97.4. So he has seen a downtick in his velocity, and the strikeout stuff has just not been there compared to other years. 20.4% K rate. He had a 30.5% K rate last year. So, we're looking at a 30% decrease in his strikeout numbers from last year to this year. 6.47 ERA. He has been, a little bit unlucky as a 4.56 FIP. But with that in mind, a lot of that is because the numbers look at his batting average on balls per play at 335 and assume that just means that he's suffered from some bad luck. But he's giving up so much hard contact that I almost think it's justified. And I have not been on Luis Castillo really at all this year. The reason being is that he continues to be popular just about every slate. And, once again, it looks like he's going to be pretty popular today. Luis Castillo picking up 18% ownership. So with that in mind, there's other guys for lower ownership that I'd rather get to that we'll talk about as we move along. But Castillo, if he ends up being somebody who's, like 5 or 6% owned, then sure, I could reasonably get to him. But not when he's nearly 20% owned against an offense. And now is Christian Yelich back. And Luis Castillo himself has just been no good this season.
No, it's good info. And, you look at Eduardo Rodriguez, hey, you don't have to necessarily be scared at his 6+ and when you look at the underlying stats. But Luis Castillo is more in that Patrick Corbin bucket where he's someone that maybe you want to target, that it's not happening for him. It's not working out. We know Matt Harvey you're going to target, but there's name value with or more recent success, let's say, with Corbin and Castillo. Brett Anderson, I mean, he's the last guy in this Brewers rotation that has been so good over the course of this year. Cincinnati was one of those teams you wanted to get on yesterday. It was really the Reds and Tigers that ended up making a profitable day for you. What do you make of the Reds' pop against a guy like Brett Anderson in a ballpark that typically allows some runs? You have an over-under of 9 at former Miller Park.
Yeah, so one issue I have with targeting against the Brewers with too much frequency is even though Brett Anderson isn't particularly good, the bullpen behind him is so good. The Brewers have such a deep bullpen that if this game ends up being remotely competitive, it's going to be tough sledding for the Reds in the later innings. So we do have them projected, fairly decently in the top stacks. Do we actually have them overall with the 4th best odds of being the top scoring team of the day? But it's not a team I think I'm going to get all that much of just because Brett Anderson, while he himself hasn't been good, like I said, the bullpen's good enough behind him that Reds not really a team that I want to go out of my way and target. And I wouldn't be surprised if the ownership comes up just because the Reds had such a big offensive day yesterday.
Tigers were the other team to get on, and they're going up against Mike Minor and the Royals. They've really struggled, at least early on in the year, against left-handers. And as we know, the Tigers are a team, they can strike out a lot. We always got to consider the pitcher against them, even if they've had some good offensive days of late. Is Mike Minor still a guy that you want to target on this night, hunting for strikeouts against a team that has struggled against left-handers?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of pro Tigers bias right now because that was the team that carried me yesterday. I had a bunch of ownership to them, and really could have been a really nice day for me. It just ended up being neutral because I had so much exposure to Tyler Glasnow when he got hurt. But I had a bunch of good-looking Tiger stacks that had Glasnow and Lance Lynn as the pitchers, and then Glasnow came out and it was like, all right, I could turn all the games off on my iPad now because nothing else matters. But listen, this is how weak the pitching options are today. Mike Minor has been not great this year. He has a 4.5 ERA. A 4.12 FIP, 4.0 expected ERA. And even with that said, he is projected for nearly 30% ownership today at 9,200 on DraftKings. And then on Fanduel, he is projected for over 20% ownership at 8,800 price tag. So Mike Minor, the chalk play at pitcher on Fanduel and DraftKings. I think it makes sense to get to him a little bit just because the matchup against the Tigers is so favorable. The Tigers have been the worst offense in baseball against left-handed pitching. But that's too much ownership going to a pitcher Mike Minor who has not been particularly good. So we're going to be talking about some other pitchers who are actually, to me, viable, but also have much less ownership than Mike Minor. So Mike Minor is going to be in my player pool, but just nowhere near the amount of exposure the field is getting to him.
One of those, I imagine, would be Casey Mize pitching for the Tigers. And Eric in the chat says Mize is the best starting pitcher on the slate. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree with that, except I have been encouraged by what we've seen out of Casey Mize lately. And, I think he's somebody who, if we look at his historical numbers, and his numbers so far to this point of the season, we can't even take too much away from it because, keep in mind, he's only 24 years old. He was the top overall pick in the draft 3 years ago. He was also a top prospect coming into the year, and he really struggled last year. He really struggled at the start of the season, but he's been much better as of late. So his DraftKings fantasy points in his last 5 starts, 30, 21, 20, 19, and 15. And considering his cheap price point at 7,100, and also that he's not picking up all that much ownership, we currently have Casey Mize projected to pick up 0.5% ownership today. If that's actually going to be the number, then that looks pretty good for me for a young pitching prospect who appears to have some upside, and the other pitching options on the slate just aren't any good. So I'm willing to bet on the arm talent of Casey Mize on a slate where the pitching options are bad, and at least as of now, it looks like the field is not getting to him at all.
And the Royals, they do have a capable offense and have a lot of familiarity with Casey Mize, but not a bad spot for him at Kansas City today. Tampa Bay, Chicago, we expected no runs in that game yesterday with Lance Lynn and Tyler Glasnow, but Glasnow exited early. Lance Lynn ended up having a decent night, even if he gave up some runs early on. I think a little different story tonight, even if the over-under is down at 7.5. It's Shane McClanahan for Tampa Bay. Good-looking young left-handed for them. You just don't know how long he's going to go. And then Dallas Keuchel, who, he's 5-1 with an ERA a touch over 4, but always feels like a guy that you can have the big day against offensively.
Yeah, so starting with McClanahan, I really liked it when he first got called up just for a strikeout upside, but his pitches have been so limited how long he's been allowed to work in the games. And now his price tag is up too. So when he first got called up, he was 5,500. And then it was like, hey, it doesn't matter if this guy throws 70 pitches because he might strike out 6 or 7 guys. And at a 5,500 price tag, if he scores 16, 17 fantasy points, you're pretty happy with that. But now that he's all the way up to 8,200, and still we haven't seen the pitches go up. So the last 4 starts for him, 67 pitches, 63 pitches, 79 pitches, 77 pitches. Just not working deep enough into games. The White Sox have a really tough offense to get outs against. And, it's a spot where number 1, he could struggle. Number 2, his price is as expensive as it's ever been. And just, the pitch count's an issue. So McClanahan, easy enough guy to avoid for me, although the White Sox, not an offense I want to get to at the same time, because with the Rays likely not going super deep with McClanahan, they're going to be going to their, solid bullpen early in the game. So we only have the White Sox with a 1.7% chance being a top stack on the slate. So that's not a team I have interest in. And then Dallas Keuchel on the other side, just not enough strikeout upside for me to really ever consider him in DFS.
How about targeting against him? I mentioned the ERA is just a touch over 4, but the FIP is, sitting there at 4.6. So he's been outperforming his ability by about half a run here.
Yeah, it's just more of the same. The Rays look like another neutral stack team that's projected for a 3% chance to be a top stack and then 2% projected ownership odds. So not a team that I'm going to be going out of my way to target, but I'll be somewhere in line with the fields. And if you're playing, just a handful of lineups, no reason to consider the Rays. But with that said, if you're playing, 150 lineups like I do, just being in line with the field with them is fine.
I'll stop asking about stacks until we get to the Padres. We got a couple of games to get through until we do hit San Diego and a warm night at Coors Field. And that's really what's going to make or break people, depending on if you're going to get on that train or stay off. And last night was a night to stay off when the Padres only went for 2 runs. But we'll hit the Astros, who they've been mashing of late as they have gotten healthy over the last month and a half now. It's been a while. They're going up against Texas on their home field. Kyle Gibson, he's not a flamethrower. He's not a big arm, but man, he's done a nice job for the Texas Rangers this year and maybe enough to neutralize Houston tonight.
Yeah, he's been quality, not another guy who not generating strikeouts this year. So it's hard to consider him a viable DFS option. Only a 20.5% K rate this year, 19.3% last year. But still, you look at his numbers overall, 2.13 ERA, 3.13 expected ERA, 3.4 FIP. So quality pitcher. He's pitching really well, probably a little bit over his head. I don't think he's going to maintain this going forward, especially when 2020 finished with a 5.35 ERA, 2019 a 4.84 ERA, also expected ERAs over 5 in each of those 2 seasons. But given how well he's pitched so far this year, I look at it as a spot where I'm not really dying to target Houston. And then Kyle Gibson himself, the matchup's so difficult, he isn't generating enough strikeouts for me to want to put him into lineups either.
Lance McCullers, though, he is someone that you really want to look at as a very good chance of being one of the top two pitchers on this slate. If you're looking at it on DraftKings, again, pitching wise, this isn't a big night. You don't have the big time aces besides, maybe Yu Darvish, but he's throwing at Coors Field. So I would think McCullers is a guy you're going to want to get to against an inconsistent, let's say, Rangers offense.
I think we need a little bit more info here. So Lance McCullers' last start in the big leagues, he's coming off the injured list. So he hasn't started since, let's see, what was the actual date of his last start? It's been a minute. He has not started since May 22nd. So, we're looking at almost a 4 week, almost a full month. So about a 4 week layoff here for Lance McCullers. And he was throwing pretty deep into games before then, but I find it hard to believe he's going to throw all that many pitches tonight. If we find out that he's totally unrestricted, then yes, I'm going to want exposure to him. But it's still something I need more information from the beat reporters about how long he's actually going to be allowed to work into the game. Because
I got the info for you. So he did throw 64 pitches in a rehab start recently. That was 4 innings. So I mean, look, if they bumped him up a little bit, maybe you're looking at 80 pitches because it is a shoulder injury, a sore shoulder that landed him. It's not like a hamstring or something you weren't worried about. So he's definitely gonna have some kind of limitation. And then Brian McTaggart has reported that the plan is to piggyback McCullers with Jake Odorizzi. So once I hear the word piggyback, then I'm thinking, man, you're maxing out at getting 4 innings.
Yeah. So with that in mind, especially because McCullers especially with McCullers being fairly expensive on both Fanduel and DraftKings, he's $8,700 on DraftKings, and then on Fanduel, McCullers cheaper at $7,500. But if he's only going to go 4 innings, there's no chance for the win bonus. There's no chance for the quality start bonus. So to me, I'm not going to be able to get to McCullers on either site with that information.
No, that's good info because sometimes you just, you look at the data and I didn't realize McCullers was out for the last month. And, you see shoulder injury, teams are going to be cautious with that. You see piggyback with Jake Odorizzi in the report. So yes, McCullers probably not a guy you want to jump on the train with tonight. Trevor Rogers, he's the most expensive pitcher on both DraftKings and FanDuel, is not generating a whole lot of ownership, at least to this point. And he's going up against a St. Louis Cardinals team that, look, we just saw them get railroaded on Sunday Night Baseball by Zach Davies. So it's an offense that can struggle. How much do you like Trevor Rogers here in his 2.02 ERA in St. Louis?
A lot, because he's projected for no ownership right now. Like a level of ownership that doesn't make sense to me. On DraftKings, we have Rogers projected for 2.6% ownership. On FanDuel, we have Trevor Rogers projected for 0.5% ownership. If these are the actual numbers, he's the best play on the slate because the pitching options are terrible. Yes. And he's been really good. His numbers this year are ridiculous. He's a 2.02 ERA, 2.92 expected ERA. From a fantasy standpoint, 29.8% K rate. Last year, 30% K rate. So I don't see any reason that he shouldn't be one of the most popular pitchers on the slate, let alone picking up no ownership at this point. So if things continue to stand as they currently are, best play on the slate and not really much question in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're willing to pay up for him, now that's where it gets a little bit tricky because his price tag, as I mentioned, is the highest. Now it's not at Jacob deGrom levels or something along those lines, but if you do roster him, and I imagine why his ownership is so low is because everyone wants to get to these Padres bats.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good chance that ownership comes up as the day goes on, but, that's just a guess. Who's to say? But, Rogers for the season, he is averaging over 20 DraftKings points. And once again, the other options on the slate are so weak. The only pitcher who's comparable to Trevor Rogers from a talent standpoint today is Yu Darvish, and he's pitching at Coors Field. So, I mean, to me, it's Rogers right now. And I really hope the ownership stands because that is that's a crazy pitching option right now. To me, a fair ownership for him would be somewhere around 20%.
I'll just mention it. I don't think it's really in play either way, but Kwang Young Kim against the Miami offense.
So the issue with Kim is just another guy who is not generating very many strikeouts this year. So Kim, let's see, what is the most amount of strikeouts he's had in a start all season? It is not very many. Of course, my app just crashed as I was looking up his game log, but Kim has been a pitcher who, he's pitched a lot to contact. He's had some success at times this year. I targeted him fairly heavily once earlier on a slate in the season. I was like, yeah, never again, because he gave up a lot of it was a start against the Phillies. He ended up scoring, it was like 14 fantasy points. and he gave up a ton of hard contact, just got hit at a lot of guys. So Kim has struck out in his last handful of starts, 3 hitters, 1 hitter, 5 hitters, 3 hitters, 6 hitters, and 4 hitters. It's just not enough strikeout upside for me to ever consider him, even though it's a pretty favorable matchup and the other pitching options aren't good.
All right, so let's get to the good stuff. Padres, Rockies, you have an over-under of 11.5 at Coors Field. 95 degrees is what the forecast is calling for, with some wind blowing out at Coors Field. I mean, you can't ask for a better setup, but I feel like overall this season, Coors Field hasn't been the big boon that you usually expected. Part of that being that the Rockies offense is just terrible. But then you have Chichi Gonzalez starting this game for Colorado as well. I mean, the Padres just, you look at the top stacked numbers. They have more than a 20% chance of being the top offense in this night. And this is a night with all 30 teams in play. I mean, this is the chalk play of the night.
Yeah, and it's fun. So even with, one of these numbers isn't going to matter now, except so the most favorable hitters parks this year, what would you say has been number one? I'd
always say Coors.
Well, no, it's been Dunedin, but that doesn't matter because they're not playing there anymore. But yeah, it's been Coors almost every year for the last few years. It's actually been third this year if we take out the parks that don't matter. It's been Cincinnati 1, Baltimore 2, and then Coors 3, and then just eliminate the goofy Blue Jays nonsense. But it's still, it's always going to be a very favorable hitters park. And I think for today, I want to get to the Padres, definitely a lot higher than yesterday. So yesterday's slate was kind of a weird one because no team really stood out massively from a leverage standpoint. Although neither positively leveraged. Although neither does today either. But so yesterday, the Padres were my most rostered offense. However, on the 13 game slate, that meant that I had them in 8% of my lineups. So even with them being my most rostered stack yesterday, I'm looking at the ownership for these guys at 30% for Tatis yesterday, like 28% for Machado. And I'm going, all right, this is my most rostered offense. I want them all to suck, though. That is what would be most beneficial to me from a fantasy standpoint, because we had them ended up closing yesterday. Their projected ownership share was something like 24%. But we only had them with a 15% chance of being a top stack. So there was massive negative leverage there. So even though it still made sense to get to the Padres because of how high their stack odds were, it didn't make sense for me to get to them at where the field was. Today is going to be different because we have the Padres with a 22% chance of being a top stack, but a 23.7% ownership share on DraftKings. So it looks about fair that they're picking up all that much ownership. So I think this is a spot where we actually want to be in line with the field on the Padres, even with all the ownership going there, because Chichi Rodriguez is terrible. Also, his game does not suit Coors Field well at all. A guy who gives up a lot of hard contact, does not generate swing and misses. So this is a spot that I hope that people are maybe a little afraid of the Padres after what happened yesterday, because relative to ownership and everything, I think this is a much better spot for them yesterday, even than it was yesterday.
Well, I think you're bringing up an interesting point with Coors Field not playing the way that we would expect. And I do wonder, this is a ballpark where I think it's hard for some guys to grip the ball, just that it's dry. And obviously the thin air, we know the breaking pitches don't move as much there in general. And this is part of the reason why they had the humidor, is to help, with the grip for the pitchers. And as we know, this is the big story in baseball. They're going to start cracking down on all this kind of stuff. Do you think that, along with the weather starting to perk up a little bit, gets Coors Field more in line with the historical norm?
It's still pretty close to it. So this year, if I pull up the ESPN park factors aren't perfect. It's just the easiest way to look at it at a first glance. So, we have them scoring about 1.3 runs compared. So a neutral ballpark would be 1.0 runs. And this year it's 1.3. So it's, games there scored, 30% more runs than average. Last year it was 1.4. 2019, it was 1.39. 2018, it was 1.3. So it's not that far off from what it's been. It's just there's been some crazy outlier parks, particularly, the Dunedin ballpark. But, it's still been a very favorable hitters park and not that much different than the aggregate over the last 5 years. So it's not that much is going to change going forward. It's been a favorable hitters park. It's just there's always going to be days where Coors Field is projected for, 20% ownership. The field's all over them. Yeah. and a team scores 2 or 3 runs, and everybody goes, oh my God, Coors Field is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. There's just crazy overreactions to Coors Field on a day-to-day basis. It's been about normal.
How about, look, if 20% of the field is going to be on the Padres, you want to differentiate yourself a little bit. What are some ways that you could do that, either with this Padres stack or I suppose with the pitching?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're just going to want to target some of the pit. But I mean, I can't just say, hey, Trevor Rogers in the Padres, because that's the most expensive offense, the most expensive pitcher. Yeah. But I mean, you could reliably get to Trevor Rogers, the Rockies offense, and then a really cheap SP2. And there is a guy, talked about Casey Mize before. Casey Mize projected for less than 1% ownership. Any lineup where you have Casey Mize with the Padres, it's going to be contrarian just because Mize is less than 1% owned. So, I mean, that's to me one of the ways that makes the most sense right now. Let's see, other pitchers we're picking up really low ownership that I like. I mean, the two are going to be Trevor Rogers and Casey Mize because both of them, 2 and 1% projected ownership. Yu Darvish, to an extent, only 12% projected ownership for him. And the other thing, too, Yu Darvish at 9,400, much cheaper price point than we're usually used to seeing on him. And, that's going to be the other side of the game we could talk about. But given the lack of pitching, like I had Dinelson Lamet in my player pool yesterday. Wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible either. He was just really inefficient with his pitch count, so he wasn't able to work deep into the game. But Yu Darvish at 9,400 against the Rockies, who have the worst offense in baseball against right-handed pitching. Even though this is Coors Field, I kind of like Yu Darvish in this spot.
It's playable. You can get some strikeouts out of Darvish at the very least. So, yeah, I mean, certainly somebody to keep an eye on. He's the biggest name on this slate, even if Trevor Rogers is the highest priced pitcher on the whole thing. Andrew Heaney has typically been one of those value guys you can look at to get to the top stack, to get to the top pitcher on a given night. But his price tag is climbing now over 8,000 on Draftkings, going up against a capable Oakland Athletics offense. We know Andrew Heaney well. We talk about him every single Tuesday when we do the show together, and he is volatile, and volatility is often a friend in these things.
Yeah, Andrew Tuesday Heaney only starts on Tuesday. It's in his contract. When they offered him contract extension, he said, "Listen, I have one thing that has to be added to the contract. I only pitch on Tuesdays." And the Angels apparently said, "Okay, we agree to that." And he does. He pitches for us every Tuesday on these 15-game slates, and extreme boomer bust option for DFS this year. He's been a middle of the road pitcher, 4.37 ERA, 4.28 expected ERA, but it's that strikeout rate. He's striking out 28.7 hitters that he faces. So with that in mind, we've seen some big fantasy outings from him, and a couple of them have come as of late. His last 2 outings, he has scored 26 and 27 DraftKings points. So Heaney's a guy who, even at 8,100 with the price up a little bit, it's hard to deny the upside because we've seen him do it time and time again. Now, there's a lot of variance here, so I think it makes sense to leverage a little bit and make a couple of A stacks on the other side. But if Heaney pitches well, he's going to have a big fantasy game because the way he gets outs is via strikeouts.
Yes, and that's the thing. He's got to last long enough to rack up those strikeouts and not get knocked out in the 3rd or 4th inning, as we've seen a few times over the course of this year. The other end of this, Frankie Montas going for the Oakland A's. He's been kind of middling, even though he was a guy that when he came up had some strikeout potential, strikeout upside on a given night.
Yeah, and Montas has had some good games lately, except he's also been in a lot of favorable matchups. Frankie Montas, the velocity still up this year, but the Angels are not a team that I like to target pitchers against. It's a really good offense, and they don't strike out a lot. This is one of the teams that's the hardest to strike out of any team in baseball. So Frankie Montas, 4.37 ERA, 4.18 expected ERA. The strikeout rate, 23.6%, also pretty middling. So everything middle of the road for Frankie Montas. Tough matchup. He's fairly expensive. A team also that doesn't strike out a lot. So Frankie Montas project for around 10% ownership right now. I think that's a number to be underweight too.
If you're going to have a big night, don't just cash in, get some free stuff along with it. And one way you could do that, go to awesemo.com/avatar, download the Awesemo avatar, throw it up on your favorite DFS site. And if you place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants, tweet the win to the @Awesemo HOF account, Hall of Fame, and you win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. A free month. So look, you not only cash in, you're getting some free info as well. And as we've talked about on the show and always talk about on these shows, when you join Awesemo Plus, you're joining a community. You get the tools and the projections. That's all fine and great, but you also gain access to our premium Slack channel. You can talk strategy and other topics with fellow DFS players. You can just torture Greg if you want to do that. You can stay up to date on the latest updates and projections from Alex Awesemo Baker himself as well. Great feature, and many of our subscribers enjoy this added perk to any Awesemo Plus package. So check that out as well. But yeah, get yourself in the Awesemo Plus, Awesemo Hall of Fame, and you can see some of the winners that we've had over the course of the last week. 3 games to go. We got 9 minutes left on the show here. Arizona, San Francisco, and we touched on what the pitching situation will be for the Giants tonight a little bit early.
Yeah, so it looks like also on the Diamondbacks, we don't have an official starter for Arizona, but it appears it's going to be Corbin Martin, unconfirmed, but we'll talk about the Giants in a second, assuming that Corbin Martin pitches. On the Giants side of the game, mostly going to be a bullpen game. It does look like we're going to get Sammy Long pitching the bulk of the middle innings, but that's a spot where I don't really like to target a lot of these long reliever type guys unless it's a spot where it's a really small slate. So Sammy Long, I get he was really good his last time out, ended up scoring 19 DraftKings points against the Rangers. But like I said before, when Soldo asked in the super chat that he left for us about Sammy Long, 4 innings, everything has to go perfect for you to actually have fantasy upside. And everything broke perfectly for him last game. And he still ends up scoring under 20 DraftKings points. And that was with him getting, did he get the win bonus in that game? No, maybe not. But either way, still, he pitched as perfectly as possible to score less than 20 fantasy points. If he replicated that performance today, you'd be happy with it as price point. But I don't know that even that would be guaranteed to be optimal. So to me, I want to, and also he might not even end up entering the game, right? He could, he's expected to, but it doesn't mean it's a guarantee. How many times have we seen that in the past with the Rays? Remember, there was a time where they used to utilize, it was like 3 out of their 5 rotation spots were bullpen games. And there were times all the time where reporters would say like, hey, it's going to be Ryan Yarbrough that comes out of the pen today. Or it would be, whoever else is in the rotation. And they'd end up going to somebody else. So Sammy Long, still, we have to factor in that, maybe there's a 15, 20% chance doesn't even enter the game. So to me, it's not somebody I want to be on.
How about the Giants offense, assuming they are going up against Corbin Martin? It's amazing. Like, I never thought Brandon Crawford would be a good one-off play consistently, and yet he has been another home run yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, too, because he is – how close is he to a career high in homers already?
I almost think he's got to be there already. He's having like a Brady Anderson season. It's just a total totally against the trend.
So his career high in homers, 2015, he hit 21 homers. He's at 15 this year. So by the way, he has played in 58 games and he's hit the second most homers ever in his career at age 34. So just a total outlier season for Crawford to this point. And, there's not a whole lot of reason to think it's going to slow down. Actually, if anything, he only has a 268 BABIP this year. So you could argue he's been unlucky. This is the lowest batting average on balls in play over his entire career. If Corbin Martin actually does end up being the pitcher for the Diamondbacks, I think we're going to want to get to the Giants because Corbin Martin, we have not seen him pitch very much at the big league level to this point. But in the 9 innings he's pitched, he hasn't gone well. And actually, I'll go back to a couple of years ago also because he's pitched a total of 28 innings in the big leagues. That's 7 starts. He has a 6.87 ERA and an 8.35 FIP in his big league career. So he's been terrible. And we don't know that he's going to be the starter, but I'm just reading the tea leaves and it seems like he's going to be. They called him up yesterday, just prior to the game. And even his minor league numbers this year. So he has made 5 starts in AAA and he's a 5.32 ERA and a 5.15 FIP in the minor league. So the numbers on the Giants are going to be a little hard to read into right now, just from a top stacks perspective and the tools and whatnot, because the starting pitcher hasn't confirmed and it's not in our projections. But if it is Corbin Martin, I like San Francisco.
Yeah, just watch with the Giants. They will, platoon some guys in the middle of the game and stuff like that. So you just want to keep an eye on that if you're going to go all in or close to all in on the Giants. Probably not going all in a night like tonight with what we have set up at Coors Field. But let's get to the Twins and Mariners. Jay Happ on the hill for Minnesota. He's another guy, a veteran guy, a little bit of a track record, not as good as some of the others we've talked about, but his ERA up around 6, going up against his M's offense with an over-under of 8.5 runs in this game, Greg.
It took me a really long time to find out that Jay Happ's first name is Jay and not J-A. Like, why is it spelled like that?
I don't know.
It is really weird. But yeah, his name is Jay Happ, but it's spelled J.A. So for the longest time, I was calling him J.A. Happ, and I was doing a baseball show with somebody one time. He goes, why do you call him J.A. Happ? It's like, because that's how it's spelled. And he's like, no, it's Jay Happ. And I was like, all right, so that's what it is. But yeah,
Jay is way easier. I'll say that. Cut off those syllables wherever you can.
Yeah, I mean, but why are we spelling it? Like, who spells a name that incorrectly? Why there's 2 periods in a name, and that's how it's pronounced. But yeah, so Hap this year not very effective. 5.75 ERA, 5.26 expected ERA. I don't expect him to find success here. But with that said, the Mariners are the team that we currently have as being the most over leveraged on the entire slate. So a 5% projected ownership share for the Mariners, that makes them the 4th most popular stack on the slate. I can't get to a poor Seattle offense when they're picking up this much ownership. So I don't have interest in Hap. He's been no good this year. Also, no fantasy upside because he's not shedding strikeouts, but I'm going to be looking to go elsewhere on offense. And as the current ownership stands, I don't have the Mariners in my player pool.
Chris Flexen up against the Twins.
Yeah. So on the other side, Chris Flexen, who, by the way, you might remember this because you're a Mets guy. And I was talking about this with Spags the last time Flexen started. Do you remember when he first got called up and the hype around him?
I don't think there was a whole lot of hype around Chris Flexen.
Yeah, there was because he had so 2017, Chris Flexen gets called up. He had a 1.66 ERA in the minor leagues at the time and was viewed as just some unhittable guy. And he was like 50% on DFS for his first major league start. But
okay, maybe DFS it was a big thing, but from a Mets point of view, it wasn't like he was a big prospect coming up. He actually, if you looked at the game logs, he's a guy who got burned by the Astros, and there was a bunch of banging going on in 2017. It started had at Houston. That pretty much knocked him out of the Mets rotation, and he ended up in Korea.
His first start was against the Padres, though. And I remember at the time, the Padres had the worst offense in baseball against right. It's funny how quickly times change because 2017, 4 years ago, the Padres were dead last in the league in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. So I remember Chris Flexen gets called up with a 1.66 ERA in the minor leagues, striking a bunch of guys out, going up against the worst offense in the league against right-handed pitching. And he also got called up Draftkings to price him at the min price, 4,000. And he's like, I got to roster Chris Flexen. And then he just sucked that game. And it was like, boy, and he's just never been good since. 6.49 ERA for his career, 5.61 expected ERA. The Minnesota offense, we do have him with the 3rd best odds being a top stack on the slate. But once again, it's a team just about appropriately owned. We have him with a 4.5% chance of being a top stack, 4.5% ownership share. So just a team where, it's a big slate. There's a lot of options and they look like a neutral play.
Okay. Finally, Phillies, Dodgers. Julio Urias, he's a guy that has great ability, great stuff, but he gets frustrated because even when he's going well, the Dodgers will pull him out. And I think they want to be very careful with his innings total from now to the end of the season.
Yeah. And it's going to be hard for me to get to Urias for that reason. If you look at his pitch count for the year, it just especially as of late, it just hasn't been there. So last few starts, 86 pitches, 83, 82, 89, 92, 87, 76. He has not thrown over 90 pitches in a start this entire season. So his innings pitched, he's had some games early in the year where he was just super efficient. For the last few outings, 6 innings, 5 innings, 5 innings, 6 innings. And that's more or less what he should expect from him when he's only going to be throwing somewhere in the neighborhood of 80, 85 pitches. So at his price point, I'd rather get to Yu Darvish. I'd rather get to Trevor Rogers. Trevor Rogers only $400 more expensive than Urias on DraftKings. Yu Darvish actually $200 less expensive. So to me, both those guys are preferred options. Then on Fanduel, Urias $9,600. So we could get Yu Darvish for $600 less. We could get Trevor Rogers for $400 more. And just where he's priced, and then also the ownership on those guys is all pretty comparable right now. Actually, Rogers much less popular than the other one. So. Yeah, I like Rogers a whole bunch more than Urias in the same price range.
Would you take Urias just totally out of your player pool because he doesn't have the same upside as these other options?
I have him 2% right now, and that number could even end up being lower by the time we get to lock. But yeah, just not a guy I'm looking to get to.
And real quick, Zach Eflin, just good enough to kind of neutralize both himself and the Dodgers?
I don't know if anybody's good enough to neutralize the Dodgers. With that said, the Dodgers are a team who I have found very difficult to stack on some recent slates, even though the pricing isn't a major concern with pitchers today. The pricing on the Dodgers is so outrageous as of late that, and we don't know if Cody Bellinger is going to be in or out of the lineup today. So taking him out of the picture, Mookie Betts, 6,200, Will Smith, 4,900, Justin Turner, 5,900, Chris Taylor, 5,300. It's not really viable to stack this team when these guys are that expensive. So that's really the issue here.
Well, hopefully we made you some money here today, and give us a like, subscribe so you can keep up with our shows, the DFS offers, the giveaways, and much, much more. And then, of course, once you do subscribe, hit that notification button, and it'll hit you 11 o'clock Eastern when we get the MLB Strategy Show fired up. And still plenty to come on the Awesemo channel. We've got the PGA Strategy Show at 1 Eastern ahead of a big week at the U.S. Open. And the tip-off is at 4 o'clock Eastern time today, diving into, of course, the Bucks and the Nets, the NBA game tonight. Our thanks to our sponsor, PrizePicks. For Greg Ehrenberg, our producer, Tyler, I'm PeteyMac. Happy stacking.